And I'm going to mute everybody's mic so that we don't disturb each other as the sirens go by and the dogs bark. Friends, welcome. My name is Stephen Fetter. I manage the United in Learning program for the General Counsel Office. And these days, that means that I am learning how to manage our new tool, which is at ChurchX. Still trying to figure out exactly how that works. And I hope that you have found your way around it in ways that were helpful. It is a new tool to us, and I'll show you just a little bit about it in a minute, but I'm also willing to take any suggestions and comments and ideas you have, because we are still trying to make it hum, and it's still a work in progress. Anyway, delighted to have you with us, and thank you for joining us for this Lenten series. It's a pleasure to be able to gather across the country this way and just take an hour out of the week to sit and reflect together and to be United Church people from across the whole country together, and to spend some time thinking about courage and where courage comes from and how our faith gives us courage. I'm going to show you a little bit about ChurchX, and then we'll actually move into the beginning of our program. But before we do the beginning of the program, particularly since today's the first day and since ChurchX is new, I thought it was a good idea to just walk you through it and show you where to find things and how it all works. So somebody has just told me that they're unable to open the ebook for our Lenten study. I'll show you where you can find the PDFs for the series that we're working on. If you've got problems with the EPUB that you bought from the United Church Publishing House, you'll need to talk to them, and I'll get back to you after the program's over with a customer service thing that will help you understand where they are. Many of you, but probably not quite all of you, have found your way into ChurchX. So let me just do that. I'm going to move my camera over because I'm looking at another screen over here, and I want to look like I'm looking at you too. If you just type churchx.ca into the browser of into your web browser, you'll come to this front page of ChurchX. Now, to find our program, you probably went browsing through our catalog, but now that you're here, you want to use this button up here, the top right corner, the login button. And that'll give you a chance to put in your name and your password. And you can see I'm using a password manager so that it reminds me, because I have too many passwords to remember otherwise. And then just log in. That'll take you to what ChurchX calls your dashboard. See, welcome to your dashboard. And it will list all of the courses that you are enrolled in. Now, you're not going to be enrolled in nearly as many as I am. That's just because this is my life, right? But I like to use this little search function in my browser to find it, just because I have so many. Look for the title for our course, Good Courage Lenten Study, and click on that. And this is what we're calling our course page. Over here on the left, you can see you can close that window if you want to, or there's this little icon that will allow you to open it again. And that's kind of a table of contents that will show you all the way through all of the different pieces and things that I've put up on this page. Table of contents might be useful to you. It might be distracting. You can close it if you want to. Here, you can see some general information about the program. Welcome to our Lenten study. On this page, you'll find all of that kind of stuff. You'll find a place for announcements, and that's where I'm posting all of those emails that I will send out to you every week. So if you've ever lost an email and want to find out what it is I said, you can come to the announcement forum, and you'll see they're all listed there. So you can go back and look at them, including the one that I sent this morning, reminder for session 1. Coming back up to the page, here's the Zoom link. If you use this Zoom link here, then Zoom will know the name that you use when you sign into ChurchX. So you'll never appear in Zoom as Huawei 32 or something unhelpful like that. You'll always see your own name, which I think is useful. If it doesn't work for you, click this one instead. Sometimes in Firefox, it doesn't work. I don't know why. We're still trying to figure that out. But it's there, and I put both links on just in case. But that's the one we hope you'll use most of the time. Order your copy of the book today. You don't need the book to participate in this live event. We're going to give you each one of the 6 readings that we're going to study together. But if you want to see the rest of the book, if you want to have either a paper copy or an electronic copy, an EPUB, you can order the book. And if you use the promo code GC Webinar, you'll get 20% off the cost. So click the link, and that will take you over to the UCRD store, where you'll have the choice to order either the paper copy or the EPUB copy, one or the other. And then for today, here's the reading that we're going to use. And when I click it, it allows me to open it with a browser or open it in Firefox. Either way, there it is. We're reading the foreword today by Lydia Smith, and that's the one we'll be talking about to kick off our study. The reason I chose that is partly because it's fun to connect with Lydia. Lydia is the editor for the whole series, and I thought it was good to get a sense from her about why we're doing what we're doing and what she was hoping to share with that. So that's the reading for today. But if you scroll down, you see for session 2, we're going to read this one by Claudio. Session 3, you'll see that we're going to read this one by Nora Vedras, and so on and so forth, all the way down. I've got them all listed there. We're also going to include video discussion starters in our live events. And I'm making those available to you as well, but you can't see them until our live session is over. The reason for that is that I didn't want to steal the thunder from the live event. So I wanted you to experience them first when we're gathering together. But I also knew that there'd be some folks on the line today who maybe are leading programs in their own congregation later in the week and might like to use those video discussion starters. So there they are, and they're available to you. And if you click on that link, you'll see there's a video player there that you can see it, or you can download the video and bring it into your own computer and then take it to the church where you have no internet and show it at the church if you have the technology know-how to do that. So I'm not quite finished doing the video editing on all of the interviews. They've all happened, and I've got 2 or 3 in the can that still need to go through the video editor. But they will all be there and available to you so that you can find your way around. So I think that's everything at the website. How does that look? Does that make sense? And any surprises, any questions, confusion? Use the chat, because there's 55 of us online now. Or if typing is really uncomfortable for you, open your mic and ask a quick question, but remembering that there's 55 of us. Anything there that's not clear? Golly, maybe I'm being clearer than usual. Okay, well, that's great. So glad you're here.
I have one quick question about the video. Is there any option to have a transcript rather than watch the video?
Good question. I don't think I've got transcripts of the video. Now, I've got 2 different videos. I've got one which is just the author reading her piece, and of course, you've already got that. Yeah. I don't think I enabled transcripts for the other one. Let me go back and look. I might have them. I'm not sure.
Thanks.
It's an important question. Thank you for asking. Rosemary points out somebody was having trouble reading the ebook. If you're reading on a computer, you probably need to download an app to do that, and there's a whole bunch of them out there that are free. I got one from the Windows store because I'm using a Windows computer. Probably the people at the UCRD store could help you around figuring out what the options are there. I'm not an expert at that. I just found that one that works for me. But EPUB format is a common format that's available to lots and lots of people. Kathy's put a link into the chat there if that's useful to you too. Yeah, you can convert it to PDF if you'd rather read it in PDF. I like the EPUB versions because I can read it on my Kobo, and that way I can put in bookmarks and run back and forth. It reformats to the screen a little better than a PDF does, but PDFs might be useful to you too. Good. Any other questions? Well, thanks for that. So the shape of our program together over the next 6 weeks, what I'm planning to do, we'll begin by just, Calibri, says one person online. What I'm planning to do is open with lighting a candle and just a little bit of music to gather us together. Today, I'm using music from my own congregation because I had it in the can on the computer. I've also sent out an invitation to all of you, and let me reiterate it here. If you've got music in your congregation from your virtual choir or from the hymns that you sang during the pandemic and recorded and so on, if you've got copyright permission to use those in a website, in a program like this, I'd love to use them. And we don't always have to use my stuff. I'm using mine because I have it here and I didn't have to go hunting further for it. But I'd love to showcase what different people have done. So let me know. There's one person already who's accepted my invitation, and I will be following up with them, maybe even for next week. But I'd love to include you in that. So we'll open with lighting a candle. We're going to do a territorial acknowledgement. We'll do an opening prayer. And then we'll read a lesson that is associated with somehow with the reading we're going to read together. Talk a little bit about the scripture lesson. We're going to listen to the author read their piece. And I mean, I know you can all read, and I know you probably all read it ahead of time, or most of you have. But there's something different about listening to an author read their own words. You hear where they put the emphasis. You hear what's important to them about it. You hear where they stumble because either they got caught or they got surprised by the words they wrote 5 months ago, or it sort of brings up a memory for them. It carries a different weight. So I thought it would be fun to have each of the authors read, and they've all been delighted to do that for you. And so we'll talk a little bit about the reading and what jumps out at us in that. And then we'll go a little deeper. And I've had a chance now to interview each of these authors and talk to them about the piece they wrote and some of the things that jumped out at me. And we'll use those. I think I'm going to break each of those up into two. We use those as a kind of a discussion starter for our own time together. Depending on how the time goes, and we'll play it by ear and see how much time we have left, we may do the second one of those conversations in small groups rather than in plenary. I'm committed to being finished in an hour, so I'm not guaranteeing we'll go in small groups because that always takes more time. And I'm using up almost a quarter of your time today just doing all of this preliminary talking, which I don't think I should have to do every week. And then we'll close with some interactive prayers of the people and with a prayer out of the book that is there, and a final closing piece of music. And the plan is to be finished here by the top of the hour. So that's the shape of our sessions together, and I hope you find that helpful. Let's take just a moment then to gather our thoughts together. I'm going to bring up a candle, and if you have a candle somewhere near you, you might want to light yours at the same time as I light mine. I do this with folks in my congregation. We have an online service 3 nights a week that we started during the pandemic. And just the symbolism of having candles burn in all these different homes somehow, to me, has a sense of unity and a sense of God being present in all of our different sites. So as we gather, take a moment to pause, take a moment to ground yourself. Feel the chair that you're sitting in. Let go of all of the stray thoughts and anxieties that get in the way. Remember why we're here. Remember where courage comes from. What we need courage for, what God calls us to do and to be, that requires not just obedience, but strength and daringness and inspiration. And as we do that, we'll light our candles and invite God to be here in the midst of us, to be the one who gives us daring and boldness and courage and creativity and strength. The one who reminds us always, wherever we are in the journey, we are not alone. Take a moment just to pause and listen to the music as we gather.
Bless the Lord, my soul, and bless God's holy name. Bless the Lord, my soul, who leads me to the Bless the Lord, my soul, and bless God's holy name. Bless the Lord, my soul, who leads me to God.
As we gather, it's important to remember that we gather on land that has been cared for and has cared for nations long before my ancestors came to this continent. And so I invite you just to take a moment in the chat to reflect on that and to let us know which territory you are sitting in or which treaty you are bound by. I'm not going to read them all. We'll just let the chat collect all of those. I'll acknowledge the Mississaugas of the new credit today. For me, it is humbling and awe-inspiring to see the list of treaties, the variety of nations, the complexity of relationships that have been a part of this land for thousands and thousands of years. Thank you for remembering and for acknowledging. And so let us pray. Gracious and loving God, you gather us together across the miles, across the provinces. You gather us to reflect on courage and to lean into your strength. You call us to deep spirituality. You call us to reflect on who we are and whose we are, and what it means to carry that gift into a hurting world. Come open our ears, come open our eyes, come teach us to listen with respect and to think more deeply and to be revitalized by this time together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Lydia refers to this portion of Elijah's story, and Deborah and Jim have volunteered to read it for us. So Deborah and Jim, please open your mics and go ahead and read it.
It's not on the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's on mine. Why isn't it on yours?
Not on mine.
There you go. I'm sorry.
Reading from 1 Kings 19, verses 4-9. Elijah went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die.
It is enough now, O Lord. Take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep.
Suddenly, an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again.
The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat. Otherwise, the journey will be too much for you."
He got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, to the Mount of God. At that place, he came to a cave and spent the night there.
Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?"
Thanks for reading. So I know that lots of us don't remember the story of Elijah really well. We spend most of our time in Sunday mornings, I think most of us do anyway, listening to the New Testament. What's Elijah doing here in the middle of nowhere? Does anybody remember? Feel free to open your mic. We don't need to talk in the chat. Just open your mic a sentence. What do you remember about Elijah in the context of this? Anything?
He's running to hide.
He's running away. What's he running away from? Or who's he running away from?
Jezebel.
Jezebel. Good old Jezebel. Who the heck is she?
She is the wife of King
Ahab.
Oh God,
Ahab.
Ahab. I was going to say, yeah.
Yep.
And he, Elijah has just tricked them. He's just, tried to. He said that God is with him, and he has proved it by setting the fire in that. And so they're after him. Jezebel is after him, and he has killed all their people.
Yeah,
So,
400 prophets of Baal, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
a classic case of winning the battle and losing the war.
Yeah.
So he has this big showdown with Jezebel's prophets. He builds this big fire. He tells them to build a big pyre. He tells them to build the big pyre, and he says, "Okay, now have your God set it on fire." And of course, Baal can't set it on fire, but God sets his on fire. And he wins the day. He proves that Yahweh is stronger than Baal, but it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, Jezebel's still the queen, and he's out in the middle of nowhere on his ear. So as Sally says, absolutely, disillusioned and running away. So that's the context for the story. Talk about courage. How do we see in this passage something about courage?
It seems to me that he has the courage to listen to the angel and not fall back on his own feelings.
Yeah.
I think he knew what would happen, but he went ahead and did it.
Yep.
Despite his wanting to give up, he trusted the words of the angel of God and kept the hope and the faith and carried on forward.
Not a way I usually am when I feel defeated.
You're here. You have to keep the trust and the hope alive that you're doing the right thing.
I'm a very practical person, so I think that, you know, that he fell asleep 2 times. I think there's something very restorative when we look after ourselves in crises.
Oh, that's so cool. I never thought of that. Anything else that we learn about courage from this story?
I think in the first place, when he called them together to pit the gods against God, that he had the courage to have the faith that God was going to come through.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we need more persuasion. The angel came twice with 2 gifts of restoration. And that to me sounds like this is the real world that I know too.
It's amazing how important food and drink is, isn't it? Somebody was saying that before we gathered, how important getting nourished is.
Yeah, nourished in our spirit and soul. But I think the other piece is he had trust in what the angels were saying. He trusted in his challenge that God would respond. So within courage, you need to have the ability to trust what you're calling upon, be it yourself or something or someone else.
Thanks, Patricia. Sally, you're saying something in the chat, and I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Could you say it again? Maybe open your mic and just...
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, as I was listening to it, I thought all of a sudden there's that kind of repetitive idea of Elijah went out into the wilderness. Hagar was sent out and was destitute, and really food came to her and voice came to her. And Jonah went out and sat under a broom tree or under a twig, you know, and then was angry because God didn't do what Jonah thought God should do. But so courage is an interesting thing, because actually what Elijah does from our normal sort of sense of thing isn't very courageous. He took off, but God seems to come at us, and when we're at our absolute lowest moment, and you know, in those moments of despair, to reignite courage in us, which I think is pretty cool.
Thank you. Anton, you have your hand up. Your mic is muted. Do you know how to turn it on? Move your mouse over the Zoom screen. Okay, got it. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. In Lydia Smith's, okay here?
Yep, sure can.
Lydia Smith's introduction to the book, we talked about courage, and it's a really tough term for me. And what I found really wonderful, and actually sits with some of my own developments currently, is that courage is what you feel in your gut. And then she says that the gut is your heart language. So I find it I was just taken aback by how rich that is. If I think about courage as what's in, we historically think of our gut or stomach, which is not off. It's sort of related, because it's so many of us are rational here. So I realized something was, I'm not my office, so that's why this is a weird. I just suddenly see myself. You're not seeing me. Well, okay, fine. I'll try and solve that.
That's okay, Anton. Not to worry.
Yeah, so I'll try and pull the blinds down. Yeah, so I just for me, I don't know who that is.
That's my phone, and I forgot to turn it off. So the leader is always supposed to say mute your phones, and I forgot. There.
Yeah.
All right. I was taken aback when I was reading before this course that boldness and courage, well, if boldness is sort of you be a bit naive, and then courage is the same as your gut feeling, which I historically, and until I read this article with Lydia, thought of gut, your stomach feeling. But no, what she's saying is the heart is sort of connected to our brains, and is sort of the way in which courage then becomes a fusing of our brain and our gut, which is low down, into our heart. So this movement of thought, which I thought I got off on this a little bit recently.
I think that's really cool. And it's a wonderful segue into the next part of our time together, which is to listen to Lydia read that piece.
Yeah, no, I presume, yeah, okay, fine.
So let me invite folks. I mean, there's always more to say, right? And I'm going to cut off the conversation over and over again through this whole series so that we can keep moving. But thank you for your comments and for the comments on the chat. Let's listen to Lydia read this piece, and then we'll carry on the conversation.
Welcome to the new me. I once believed that big risks, finances, safety, freedom, life, were needed for a display of courage. The more at risk, the more against the flow, the more courageous the person. But when people started calling me courageous for things that I thought more demonstrated my boldness or naivete or my shamelessness, I began to realize that courage is a personal thing. Only my gut can determine where my true courage lies, because my gut is where my heart lives, and courage is heart speech. To follow my gut for the greater good, especially when I'm afraid of the consequences, is to be courageous. I pray that following my gut would get me into the sort of trouble that Congressman and social activist John Lewis encouraged, the sort of trouble that makes a change for the good and builds God's beloved community. This sort of trouble is not always grand and heroic. Sometimes it's as bold as hoping for a better future, and as courageous as accepting ourselves as beautiful, beloved, and constantly becoming. Sometimes courage is boldly declaring, "Welcome to the new me." In this book, Good Courage, I hope that this book will help you deepen your relationship with God and change for the better. We hope that you'll treat this book like a courage workbook, that you'll circle words that evoke strong feelings, doodle your inspirations in the white spaces, write in the margins your gut reactions, color the fish to match your mood. Reflect on what courage means to you. Determine what courage looks like and leave it in the pages of this book as a marker to help you reflect on where faith, love, and courage have taken you as you continue to become. Welcome to Good Courage.
Lydia is such a lovely, warm person, isn't she? What jumped out to you in that? What did you notice? Or is there a phrase or a line that grabbed you as she was reading or as you read it ahead of time? Again, either share in the chat or open your mic if you can do it quickly. I muted all the mics when we were playing the video just so we didn't interrupt each other.
Stephen, I was just blown away by courage is a gut, is where my heart lies, is where courage is begun.
Thank you.
Heart speech.
Aaron says courage is a personal thing.
But is it? I don't know that. It may very well be. Anyway, that's a discussion point. Interesting.
Thank you. Sherry says courage brings our convictions out. Thanks, Sherry. Other thoughts?
I like the last sentence. Taking you as you continue to become. And I think that's what we are all doing. No matter our age, we are still becoming.
Thank you. Rosemary says in the chat, the John Lewis philosophy of good trouble always gets to me.
And I guess what becomes clearer is courage isn't something you get and then you've got it and that's it. It's a process. It's something that you're living all the time, right? And constantly becoming.
Mm-hmm. Nancy's mentioning that in the chat too.
Lydia mentioned, she starts off with, welcome to the new me. And I suspect that each time we journey through something that is a dabbling in a courageous personal experience, we are becoming a new me. And we should welcome that.
Thank you. Brenda, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I like the connection between the gut and the heart, because I think sometimes if we engage the mind, we can talk ourselves out of being courageous as well.
We sure can.
Ourselves away from it. So if we just connect the gut and the heart, I think that's for me where courage lies.
I think Margaret had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
I saw the hand going back and forth.
Sorry.
No?
No, oh, that's okay. Connections that you're noticing between what Lydia writes and Elijah's story? Why did you choose that passage as a to help frame her writing, do you think?
I think it's important because there's a subtle connection between the angels feeding Elijah, which feeds the gut, which supports the heart, which gives you strength to take that courage forward.
Nancy's acknowledging we can talk ourselves out of courage. We express our courage together. And Beryl says, sometimes courage is sitting with your fear and confusion and having the patience to find the way to let go and let God. I should say, I'm not requiring you to read the chat. Sometimes that's distracting, but I will read the chat and God reads the chat. And I'll try to make sure that those comments get included. Susan is reacting to the line, treat this book like a courage workbook. It's not just a book we read, it's work. It's courageous work.
Sorry. I guess another implication here is that we sometimes act and have to act in courage even when it doesn't make total rational sense.
It sure didn't for Elijah, did it?
No.
No.
But it makes heart sense. It makes gut sense.
Yes. Gary says that's what we do in the United Church. We take casserole to those who are hungry in spirit and having a hard time with something. Well, sometimes we are the angel. Yeah, thank you, Gary. Well, Margaret's acknowledging that our gut and brains are connected. Jerry says, like in Elijah's time, we still have to continue the work to keep our courage strong, to honor God. It is work, isn't it? It's not something that comes naturally. Let me take you a little deeper. Lydia and I had a chance to talk through some of this together, and I'm going to play you some of our conversation, and then we'll stop and talk about it, and then I'll play you the rest. Lydia, I loved the line where you said to follow my own gut for the greater good, especially when I'm afraid of the consequences. So that's hard. Where do you get the strength to do something like that?
You know, good question. Like I find myself constantly singing this one Rodgers and Hammerstein line, I'm seeking the courage I lack. I'm seeking the courage I lack. And Fräulein Maria was singing it as she was leaving the convent. But I think for me, what helps me to seek the courage that I lack in those situations is that aspiration of who I hope to be. What helps me get through it is the thought, well, would I be able to live with myself if I didn't? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like how will this help me sleep at night if I'm wondering what if, and I try as much as possible not to not live a life of what if, but also to think about what I would like to be and who I would like to be and how these decisions reflect who I would like to be. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that's what I am, but do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean, I often feel like I need to bring my head and my gut together.
Yeah.
And I'm often not that integrated.
And usually like I can think of really specific examples like where my exit was so easy. Like, it was just so easy to go that way, but my gut just firmly rooted me where I was. Like, so it's that clear aspiration of what I think would be right or what I feel would make myself proud. Like what action would I be more proud of?
I think that's why some people wear "What would Jesus do" bracelets.
Yeah.
It's sort of, am I really living out the values I say I believe in?
Right. And it's kind of funny because those bracelets, it's not like what Jesus would do in that situation might not be what I would do, but would Jesus be okay with it? Like, is kind of the next level of it, because like Jesus might not do what I was doing, what I'm doing, but I would really hope that Jesus is okay with what I'm doing, because that's kind of my fault line. Like, that's what I'm testing things against.
For sure. We have more, but I thought that was enough to chew on. What jumped out at you in that? What did you notice?
She's right. Where that open door for an escape, that's an option. That's always an option. There's always the temptation put out there. But God does put the convictions in us to stay strong and focus on one course until successful.
Thank you.
It's very action based. Like she said, would I be able to live with myself if I didn't do this? Or what action would I be most proud of? Which action should I do? So it's very action based. It's not sitting around thinking, I want to do this or do I not? It's actually getting up and doing it.
So courage is a behavior, not a feeling. That's interesting, Karen. Thank you.
I think courage has two aspects to it. I see a dual thing going on. Like, to be fully courageous, it requires getting out of yourself. Like, we can have courage inside ourselves, but if we do not communicate the courage when we need to communicate it, then it's not really courage. I had a friend say that when she got the negative emails that I was getting, she just deleted them. And I said, no, you have to tell people that they're negative. You have to. So it requires another function to be totally courageous. Like, for ourselves, okay, we know what to do, and we know what God is telling us to do for ourselves. But it's also like, what does that mean for the world? We have to get it out of ourselves.
Thank you. Someone on the chat is saying the "would Jesus be okay with it" angle is interesting. They say it implies that there's more than one way of being right or being good. And maybe one way is better than another, but there are others that are acceptable. And I would go it even further to say, I think God demands creativity out of us, not just blind obedience. And maybe even God is surprised at some of the things we come up with. I don't know. What do you think?
I like the benchmark of the question to self, would Jesus be okay with what I am doing? Because it suggests that there are other options.
I think that that sometimes God is okay with what we're doing, knowing that in the end we might decide it wasn't the right thing, or it was partly right. That we're finding our way, and finding our own way is really critical.
Beryl says it's almost like, if you can't do good, at least do no harm. Sort of Hippocratic oath, right?
if we also do it with pure intentions and pure heart in order to honor God, I believe that Jesus would be okay with it.
Sometimes I think that to have your own way of doing things and to step forward and God letting you do it is like letting your 2-year-old choose their own wardrobe for the day. Eventually you'll learn a better wardrobe. But as you said, he lets you do it your way.
I remember one of the best parenting books I had said, give your kids choices where all the options are acceptable. So you don't say, what do you want for dinner? You say, would you like broccoli or beans? Anton, you've got your hand up.
Stephen, I really like this concept of constantly becoming is the same, has similarities to being creative. And if then creativity, and if Elijah, creativity is often produced by fear and by danger and by, and Elijah's case, running away yet challenging. I don't know. He was in a whatever difficult place, and when in difficult places, and when he's taking all these risks, then in some ways he's forced to become something else. But he's also forced to be really creative in finding what is the possible solution to the situation I'm in, and then his gut has to kick in. There's really just a circle of creativity inside your body. Instead of his body or our body, I guess, whatever. And inside our bodies, and then we got to figure out, okay, how does this circle of creativity work as we are aging or as we're having challenges or medically challenged or whatever happens in my life. And then I say, okay, well then it's constantly, I'm constantly becoming constantly creative, and going to circles where it never stops. But there's always some fear. There's always some fear, some sense of, oh, whatever, I'm not in a good place. I just find it just whole new avenues of thought have opened up here.
Cool, thank you. I'm going to cut us off, and because I'd like to look at the third piece of this video.
Sorry, Stephen.
But once again, there's always more to say than we have time for, right? And that's wonderful. I'm glad you're having so much fun with this. Let's see where Lydia and I went next. So what I'm really aware of these days in myself is how my humanness limits my perspective. And that sometimes with the best will in the world, I make a choice that is wrong, and I don't even know about it till afterwards. I mean, I think that's what's going on with some of the residential school stuff. I mean, some of what we did as a church was awful and evil, and we knew it at the time. Some of it wasn't. We thought we were doing the right thing, and we were doing evil both at the same time. So how do you guard against the possibility that the choice you're making, which is courageous and intended to be for the good, might prove later not to be?
Yeah, I think it's a rough question, particularly like the evil of those institutions was evil. And I realize that there are lots of people who thought they were doing good within it, but the system was evil, right? The system is evil. It's still evil. Like I still think it's the colonial mindset is sinful, and it continues to be sinful, and we find ourselves complicit in that, and that is sinful in itself. So I think on that kind of bigger picture, the sin of racism is ongoing, and decolonizing ourselves from that sometimes feels next to impossible within the colonial institution that created it. So it's hard for me to use residential schools or residential institutions as an example, because I it's gross, right? Like it's a gross,
It is.
it's a gross act of evil that, and evil ideologies played into that. Like there's so many other things that people buy into, and sometimes you buy into it, and sometimes you're trying to get by and you're stuck in the system. I think for me, not really a safeguard against being wrong, but kind of the always assumption that I am wrong. I think just constantly having that assumption that I don't got this right. Yep. And knowing that helps me to be more humble in what I'm doing.
That's a significant act of humility, eh?
You're right.
So you can hold courage and humility together.
Yeah. So then to step out, even knowing that you're probably wrong, because what do I know? Like I know only in part to begin with, and I live in this system that is sinful and I know has penetrated me in some ways. You know what I mean? Like, so we live within a system that is oppressive. I work within a church that was able to be a part of those institutions. So there's so much wrong going on. I have to assume that I'm in the wrong and I'm trying to make right. So I think that helps me in not holding on to things too tightly. Cool. Because I think it also helps in realizing that I can never be doing something for someone without them. So it's always with. And I don't think there's ever a point in time when someone would say this is okay. Like someone like people the church condones slavery and the enslavement of people forever. And I'm certain there would never be an important time where I would meet an enslaved relative and they'd be like, oh yeah, we're okay with this. Like that wouldn't have happened. No. But if we were in conversation with each other, honest conversation from the beginning, and held people's opinions, and not opinions, but if we were working with as opposed to for, those voices would have been heard from the beginning, because it's not like a new revelation that this is wrong. There have always been people who knew it was wrong. It's just that people weren't listening to them. So that dialogue, I think, is important, of always working with, and always having the key stakeholders at the table. But then, as you said, like the humility of it, there's just the assumption that I do not know what is going on. I'm doing my best.
This is tying into the other phrase that jumped out at me, and this is the last question that I think we can talk about in this quick discussion starter, but you used the phrase building God's beloved community. I just love that phrase, but tell me a little bit about how you see us doing that and what's involved in that.
Yeah, I think I love the idea of building God's beloved community, because it's something. Remember Dorothy Soleil, the theologian and poet, and she writes in one of her poems, "He needs us," and that Jesus could build God's kingdom, but he won't without us. Mm-hmm. And that idea that it needs to be a team effort and we need to do it together, to create, as we pray, almost like as I pray daily in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Like God's beloved community is God's kingdom on earth. And to create that, I think, is part of the goal. Well, it's part of my goal as Christianity. Like that's what I'm about. That's what I'm trying to do in the work that I'm doing. But it's also part of the reason why I believe that you can't be a solo Christian, that like it needs to be in community. Like we need to be working it out, testing it out, giving each other courage, holding each other to account, helping each other realize our faults and where we're wrong, and being something better together. So like in that beloved community, we are working together. And I think the beloved part is super important too. Like in that community where everybody is valued and everybody is loved and everybody is precious, we would never be in a situation where some voices would be heard more than others, or some lives would be cared for or appreciated more than others. Like we would never get into the situation where we would try and colonize people and take away their cultures and heritage because we loved them for who they were.
Part of our role in this beloved community is to give each other courage, you said. That's wonderful. And that just ties into the whole theme of this whole book.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. I think you've given us lots to talk about, and I can hardly wait to hear how people grapple with what you said.
I can't wait to hear it either.
So, your turn. You heard us talking about that. What jumped out at you in that? A couple of comments on the chat. I'm not going to read the really long one from Gary because it is so long. Rosemary says, I'm often asking myself not, am I right, but rather, how do I know I'm right? And then have some self-discussion. Very tiring, she says. I bet it is. Other thoughts? What else jumped out at you in this?
Stephen, can I say something?
Yes.
So I feel like there's an infinite bunch of responses we can make to any one tricky situation, right? Infinite number of responses. And we're trying for a courageous response. We're trying for a graceful response. And it seems to me like that's what's amazing, is when God's grace shows up and like, hey, it wasn't me. It was like God blessing something and opening a window when the door was shut, and like all those possibilities in there, the blessing and the grace. But sometimes we have to act first, and then it gets built on that, right? In that building of the kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other comments?
That's what I was thinking too, Marie. I'm glad you said what you said, because it really lifted up for me some thoughts that I've been having about building God's kingdom. And that's what Alita has said in the video clip too, that God won't do it without us. And to me, that thought is very hopeful, but it's also very scary because it requires a certain level of courage and humility, and we're not all there at the same time, if we're there at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why these Zoom sessions are really helpful, because those of us who care enough to be there are making the effort to actually start the process rolling anyway. We can't do it all. We need a lot of people.
We do. And Beryl says in the chat, you can't be right by yourself. We have time for one or two more comments, and then we have to draw this to a close. We are as a whole, are one, says Sherry. We are to love and encourage each other as a whole.
What do I know? I don't know a lot at any given time, but I am prepared to do the work. And that is what she is indicating to me, that whatever I choose to do should be good work towards achieving the goal that she has outlined.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Brenda says sometimes loving each other is challenging each other. Thank you, friends. What an interesting conversation. And I'm sorry that we have to draw it to a close, but we are hitting the top of the hour, and hasn't the time flown? So glad that you could be with us. We're not going to do interactive prayers today. I think I talked too much at the beginning, but I would like us to close with this prayer from the Ash Wednesday section. Lydia's forward doesn't include a prayer. And the other weeks we will look at the prayer that the author themselves wrote, but Lydia's doesn't. I loved this prayer from Ash Wednesday. unfortunately, we cannot say it together and stay in time on Zoom. So I'm going to mute everybody's mics again, but I invite you to pray along with me as we close our meeting together with this lovely prayer from Good Courage for Ash Wednesday. Let us pray. God of deepest desires, we live better when we are possessed by your Spirit, devoting our hearts to you amidst our community. We confess our devotion has been in things and not on you. We have replaced the care for our communities to care only for ourselves. Help us learn again how to devote our hearts to you so that we can discover time and again how to pray, how to serve, how to love your people, our communities, the land around us, and all its living beings. And as you go from this place, have courage, hold fast to what is good, dare boldly, as St. Augustine said, act in community and find blessing and wholeness on the journey. And the blessing of God, Creator, Word, and Spirit be with us all, this day and forever. Amen.
Go now in peace, never be afraid. God will go with you each hour of every day. Go now in faith, steadfast, strong, and true. No, we will guide you in all you do. Go now in love and show your belief. Reach out to others so all the world can see. God will be there, watching from above. Go now in peace, in faith and in love. Amen. Amen.
Well, thank you, friends. Good to be with you today, and delighted that we've had such a great beginning to our session together. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you for participating as well as you did. If you'd like to volunteer to read or be a part of these sessions sometime in the future, let me know, and I'd be glad to include you. I'd also love to include music from your church as well as just music from mine. So looking forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you so very much, everyone. Stephen, you are a true blessing.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. That's lovely.
Thank you.